thaa mũgwanja cia mĩaraho rĩu itigetie ndagĩka ĩmwe na nĩ ihinda rĩa mohoro Gitau tũkũmenyithia ũrĩa bũrũri ũhana gũkinyeria rĩu. Rĩtwa rĩakwa nĩ Kimani wa Ngũnjiri na tũrĩ na Nyambura wa Moshale mũthathaũri na njĩra ya ciĩko tũkwambĩrĩria na ici cia atĩ mũrũgamĩrĩri mũnene wa kambuni ya ũtambia wa thitima ya KPLC Engineer Joseph Sirol rĩu nĩ arutĩirwo watho wa kerĩ wa gwĩkinyia mbere ya kamĩtĩ ya mbunge ĩgiĩ hinya kũrĩa ningĩ athĩtwo kũrĩha faini ya ciringi nuthu mirioni kumana na kũng'athĩria cikaro cia kamĩtĩ ĩno. Sirol egũtanyĩtwo gwĩkinyia mbere ya kamĩtĩ ĩno gũcokia ciũria cia KPLC gũthiĩ na mbere kũrĩhia Kenya marĩhi ma igũrũ marĩa ona mwandĩki mũkaru ministry-inĩ ya energy atanahota gũtarĩria, na rĩu reke twambe tũthikĩrĩrie mĩario ya maũndũ marĩa maumĩrire thĩinĩ wa kamĩtĩ ĩyo.
Work is it's a constitutional obligation for all the officers, and we cannot allow any officer, any parastatal head to frustrate the work of the committee. And it is understandable when maybe we have an issue, maybe once in a while, it is understood. And in many occasions when there are several commitments, then you would engage. For instance, I want to give an example. I had a discussion with the CS in the morning and explained why he could not be able to join us. And we give a go-ahead ahead after consultation with the committee. So, but now, when we invite CEOs, they cannot do a no-show. It is not within their decision to decide whether to come or not. And therefore, the legal counsel and the clerk, you will process a summon for appearance of the MD. And in addition to that, the MD will also incur a fine. And you should always know that a committee of Parliament in his sitting is equivalent of a High Court of Kenya. It is not the first time a committee of Parliament is issuing a fine. He will now be the second person officer to incur a fine, and I think the fine is already defined. It's 500,000. So if the MD doesn't appear on the summon, then he is arrested. And I also want to make it very clear to our MDs that the committees of Parliament have all the powers to institute a process to remove an MD who seems to frustrate the process of the committee, discharging its duties to the public. I do not know why it is supposed to be taken as a joke. Sometimes we have some MDs traveling abroad, and also this Kenya Power MD is gone to that. Is a tourist. He would very quickly take a tour to Malaysia, as opposed to appearing before committees to respond to concerns by Kenyans as raised by members of Parliament. Because when members of Parliament raise issues, they are not raising their issues. They are raising the issues of the people they represent. Therefore, this we cannot be able to proceed with this for UPS to respond to matters affecting Kenya Power when Kenya Power itself is not there. And we will also probably discuss as committee to what extent do we allow PSs to struggle with the matters of individuals who are celebrating out there, people who are then can be free not to do any research, cannot be held accountable to their very own institutions, so that then those things end up being blamed on a CS or a PS. A PS cannot be responsible for hiring in Kenya Power, for instance. How is that possible? Because the Kenya Power, there is an MD there and there is a board there. It is about time everybody carries their own cross, so that we leave matters policy to the ministry the heads. And then the parastatals do their part, because that there has to be a distinct, otherwise then we can make you the PS and also the MD Kenya Power, if that was the case. So there has to be a level at which every head of institution must do their work, and therefore we will not be able to proceed in this particular manner, and therefore someone will be processed. Again, remember, it is not the first time that the MD is invited here. Is invited several times and does not make appearances. Then that the committee will no longer tolerate that. If there is an individual who feels is too busy with other matters, that individual is going to be let free to concentrate on those other matters, and then we can quickly identify a competent Gen Z who can be able to handle those particular assignments. So the meeting is adjourned, unless maybe there is any member with them.
Mabithaa atano kuma ceceni-inĩ ya borithi ya Gigiri arĩa maikirio ngono na gũkinyio igoti-inĩ magĩkuruhanio na gũteithĩrĩria kũũra kwa ekũĩrwo 13 ceceni-inĩ ĩyo ya borithi nĩ marekereirio nĩ igoti. Mũcirithania Martha Nazushi oigĩte itũmi iria iheanĩtwo nĩ rũhonge rwa borithi kũhingĩra mabithaa ya ti njiganu gũthiĩ na mbere kũhingĩra mabithaa aya na amarekereria na bodi ya ciringi 200,000 o mũndũ na mũigana wa ciringi kana wa kĩndũ gĩa kũrũgamĩrĩra bodi ĩno kĩa mũigana wa ciringi 100,000 harĩ oro mũndũ.
By them not objecting to being detained, the court reads a sign of good faith and their willingness to cooperate with the investigating officers in this investigation. The reasons advanced for detaining them are not compelling to this court to allow their application. I therefore hold as follows: the respondents be and hereby admitted to bail on the following terms. Each respondent shall execute a personal bond of 200,000 shillings each with one surety. The surety shall also execute a personal bond of 100,000 shillings on behalf of each respondent, and they are to ensure the attendance of the respondents to the office of the investigating officer twice a week for the period requested of the 14 days. The ruling is dated and signed in open court in presence of all parties.
Kĩgomano kĩa hamwe gĩa kũgitĩra marĩa matũrigicĩirie rungu rwa mũtaratara wa gũthaitĩra mataũni marĩa marakũra na gĩkĩro kĩnene gĩtaro-inĩ kĩa Afrika nĩ kĩambĩkĩtwo rungu rwa AFDAN. Muoroto mũnene arĩ nĩ gwĩtia gĩcunjĩ kĩnene kĩa bajeti ya gũthaitĩra ũthũkangia wa rĩera gĩtaro-inĩ kĩa Afrika. Na ihinda rĩrĩ ndĩramenyithio mũtongoria wa ODM Raila Odinga niwe ũrathiĩ na mbere na kwarĩria kĩgomano kĩu. Reke tũthiĩ ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe mwena ũcio nĩguo tũthikĩrĩrie mĩario ya Raila na mendekithia make.
A stuck gramophone. You know, you go down and round and round because it's the same language we speak year in, year out. But maybe that is a subject for later. For now, I just want to say that it's my pleasure to be part of this great and noble occasion where Africa sits with partners through the platform of African Green Climate Finances, designated National Authorities Network, to discuss climate change and how to respond through accelerated access to climate change. Climate finance. We are here to exchange ideas on a common problem, the view to develop a common approach and a common solution. I take note that AFDAN has been established to enhance mobility of climate finance, make it more readily accessible to support Africa in enhancing adaptive capacity and building resilience of our people, both in the rural and urban setups, through locally led solutions. I'm aware that ABDAN is already recognized by the Committee of African Heads of States and the government on climate change. This gives it the right leverage to undertake its role. Climate finance has been here with us, but access to the finances remains one of the biggest challenges in responding to climate change. I said that will sound like a stuck gramophone record. Because as you know, I was in COP15 in Copenhagen. I was in COP16 in Cancun, in Mexico. I was in Maputo. I was in Paris. Two years ago, I was in Sharm el-Sheikh. From COP15, from Copenhagen to Sharm el-Sheikh, it was the same language, year in, year out. You go all the time going there to whine, to cry. This is why I was saying that we sound like a stuck gramophone record. The more the things change, the more they remain the same. The continent continues to face some areas of challenges associated with adverse climate change effects. Consequently, the vulnerable segments of our population, particularly the poor in both rural and urban communities, continue to bear the brunt of climate change. You know, as already been said here, that Africa is a victim, not the offender, in this exercise. Africa's emissions is negligible compared to what we are going through globally. Yet you can see that today Africa lives between two twin disasters here. Floods and drought. Year in, year out. This year, this country suffered very severe floods. A lot of infrastructure destroyed. Many people displaced. Up to now, people are still suffering from the consequences of just recent floods. Down there, as we were going through floods here, down the south, there was the drought. They are going through a very severe drought in the south. And this happens across all the continent, year in, year out. So we are victims. Yet the offenders themselves keep on using language. They come and use nice language, but that's all it is. The resolutions are passed, they just ignore. So we need to find a way of forcing implementation of resolutions which are passed. Which means that one such fundamental issue is the promise by the rich countries to play their part and help the countries that contribute the least in greenhouse gas emissions into adaptation. Because of the failure to translate the promises into reality, Africa as a continent still has challenges with access to some of the climate finance sources, such as the Green Climate Fund, Global Environment Facility, Least Developing Countries Fund, Adaptation Fund, Climate Investment Funds, as well as the bilateral and multilateral development partners, which are all well-established avenues for accessing climate finance. Consequently, Africa can only access 4% of the climate finances, which is way below the impactful finance. With rapid urbanization of our continent and the development trajectory, Africa has an opportunity to chart its own pathways, which will ensure that African cities adapt to climate challenges. Because Africa is urbanizing fairly rapidly now. But urbanization is a global phenomenon. even in Europe.
Tugitingana na icio ni ati thirikari ni uritio kugia na uigiririki na ihuthie ngombo iria iroya na njira ya waragania, kuona Kenya nio matigagwo na murigo wa gucireha nyingi cigioka na marehe maiguru ma njoherera. Ni ndeto erekererio hindi ya gikaro gia thiku igiri kana kiria kihaririirio ni gikundi gitari gia githirikari kia Okoa Uchumi.
The government is broken. Excessive debt hinders the state's ability to perform its essential functions, such as providing education, healthcare, ensuring economic stability, and protecting the vulnerable. When debt is mishandled, it undermines the very foundation of our social contract. This is where the law must intervene, not just to regulate, but to safeguard, ensuring public borrowing is carried out with transparency, accountability, and a strong sense of justice.
People normally talk of the domestic debt, the external debt, which everyone ties it to Chinese IMF and the World Bank loans. But we also have the elephant in the room, which I think has been put silent and nobody talks about it a lot, is the domestic debt and pending bills. Pending bills also is a debt, is an obligation to the government. And as we are speaking, the figures of public debt as at 30th June by both the counties and national government is almost 800 billion. The national governments owes the public pending bills amounting to 516 billion, and the county governments owe the public pending bills amounting to 152.37 billion. These figures is almost $1 trillion. These are figures owed to suppliers, creditors, people who did work and finalized, handed over to the government, but still have not been paid. With regards to the domestic debt, the total amount as at 30th June was around 4.8 trillion, and the external debt was 5.4 trillion. If you look at the principals which are paid, which we have paid in the last financial year, for the domestic debt, the principal only we paid 290.9 billion, and for the external, the amount paid was 537.78 billion.
Nego gukorwo na meke makiria ma 7,000 ya mawira ikiro-ini itiganite thirikari-ini kurumirira kuhuruka wira kwa aruti wira aria makinyitie miaka 60 mwaka uyu. Kuringana na mwaria wa thirikari Isaac Mwaura, nego kugia na miaka ingi 43 ihinda-ini ria miaka 5 yukite, undu uria uguteithiriria mbeu njithi kwandikwo mawira ma thirikari.
Part of the feedback included a requirement that public servants who attain the retirement age of 60 years to be released to proceed on retirement immediately. This is also aimed at paving way for the hiring of younger persons. I wish to report that the President issued a directive on this requirement, and it is already being implemented. Some 39,360 civil servants are expected to retire from this service in the next 5 years based on the June 2024 payroll. This is in addition to 7,477 officers who have retired between 13 September 2023 and 30th June 2024. These officers are from state departments, county executives, and county assembly. The payroll also shows that a total of 43,976 officers are aged 55 years and above and are expected to retire between this year and the year 2029, with a total of 7,662 poised to retire in this financial year alone. Some more 39,441 Kenyans are serving the government on contractual terms, with their contracts expiring on different dates depending on their period of engagements. This means the creation of a total of 46,838 job opportunities to our jobless youth, who will now be able to serve the government either on permanent and pensionable or contractual terms upon the declaration of these vacancies.
Ruo ruhonge rwa guthingatithia uigiririki barabara-ini NTSA ni rukirirwo ni undu wa mitino iria yongererekete na gikiro kinene mabarabara-ini. Kurerekana ruhonge ruru ni ruretikiria ngari itakinyaniirie ikiro gukorwo ire barabara-ini, undu uria uthiete na mbere na gucungiriria andu aingi gute mioyo yao. Undu uyu ukite riri mundurume umwe uria murwe arakuireire mutino-ini wa barabara mwena wa Mega barabara-ini nene ya Naikuru guthie Eldoret muthenya wa keri kiumia giki oigite ni eguthie igoti-ini guthitanga NTSA ni kwaga uigiririki wira-ini wao. Abdi Malik Shukri uria urari murutwo thukuru-ini wa Masinde Muliro University akuire thutha wa nguraro njoru mutino-ini uyu uria watigire andu angi 12 makuite.
Sema bole. Hakuna mtu yote amesema habari mzuri bole ndugu yangu mpaka wa saizi. Hakuna kuburi. Hakuna shida. Hiyo watu mimi nitadili na hawa mpaka kulingana na ujuzi ambao yuko naye. Hiyo bus ilikuwa scrap. Ilikuwa imeosa. Kabisa. Na wenyewe hajali. Hii bus wakati umetoka Kamega imeharibikia njiani mara 3. Mpaka kijana yangu ambao Abdimalik apeleke Mungu beboni ameitisha pesa yake. Na hawa imekataa, amesema hakuna pesa tukurudishia, ingia kwa gari. Kama kijana akipewa pesa hakuwa anapata shida kama saizi akiingia kwa gari nyingine. Hiyo ni kazi ya NTSA. Hata NTSA ya from border to Mombasa, tuseme Uganda to Mombasa, hako kwa highway. Hata leo asubuhi mimi nimepita kwa highway. Na sijui kazi yao nini, mimi sielewi.
Hiyo basi haingefaa kuwa kwa njia. Tunaomba serikali ichangamkie na ifanye bidii kuhakikisha kwamba basi zile hazitoshi kuwa kwa njia ziondolewe kwa njia.
NTSA hakuna kitu wanafanya. Wao kazi yao wameshindwa. Sasa tunawaambia NTSA wajibike, waanze kufanya kazi yao. Barabara imekuwa mbaya, madereva hawatii kwa sheria ya barabara. Hiyo ndio shida ambayo tuko nayo.
Mutumia wa munini wa President Pastor Dorcas Rigathi oigite ari na mwihoko thirikari ni kuiguithania na arutani niguo kurigereria mugomo wa arutani uria uhaririirio kwambiriria kiumia giukite kana kiambiriria kia kiumia giukite arutwo makihingura thukuru. Akiaria mwena wa Oloitoktok kaunti-ini ya Kajiado, Pastor Dorcas augite mugomo ucio ugithie na mbere ni uguthararia mathomo ma arutwo tamu ya gatatu na kuhinga arutwo aria matanyite gwika kigeranio gia KCSE muthia-ini wa mwaka uyu. Pastor Dorcas ni ahoete kamite ya kwandika arutani TSC kunanira njung'wa na arutani niguo kuiguithaniria mugomo uyu ungirugamio utambiriirie kana kuiguithaniria uria mugomo uyu ungirugamio utambiriirie
kimwe o ta uria tukoretwo tukiruta wira twi kindu kimwe. Muthenya wa Jumatatu ithuĩ tugakorwo tugitwarana twi hamwe tukambiriria thabari itu kuma Jevaji Garden Kirugoya opposite KCB tuthiete obicini cia TSC kuria the national government headquarters kumutwarira mateta maitu na niguo nake atwarire headquarters TSC mateta macio tucoke tucere obici ya director of education niguo nake agikire ministry thukuru ciana itire na arutani ni tondu ni tugomete.
Giki ni gikundi gia atongoria Kirinyaga branch ya NAT twi haha tukiuga ati ni tusupportete atongoria itu matongoretio ni our Secretary General Collins Oyu na kuga ati muthenya wa Jumatatu tutikahingura thukuru tugaikara mucie turi arutani na ni turoria aciari aitu magaikiga ciana ciao mucie matikanacokia thukuru tondu gutiri arutani akumamenyerera na ithuothe Kirinyaga ni twauga okorwo gutiri mbeca gutiri wira okorwo gutiri mbeca gutiri wira.
Nacio no amwe atongoria a ngwatanĩro ya NAT marageria gũtarĩria mamwe ma maũndũ marĩa maracũngĩrĩria mũgomo ũcio ũkorwo ũgĩbangwo kwambĩrĩria kiumia gĩũkĩte, na nĩtũgũkĩhoka atĩ thirikari kũgerera rũhonge rwa kwandĩka arutani TSC oro ũndũ ũmwe na ngwatanĩro ici cia arutani nĩ cigũkorwo cikĩiguithanĩria nĩguo mũgomo ũcio ũgĩthatio. Hau niho tũgwĩkĩra gaturumo mohoro Gitau mĩaraho ya ũmũthĩ mwĩroreri wa Kameme TV, na tũkiuge nĩ ngatho mũno nĩ ũndũ wa gwĩtĩkĩra gũtwarana hamwe na ithuĩ. Reke ngwendithĩrie mĩaraho mĩega na wĩroreri mwega wa tabarĩra iria cikũrũmĩrĩra. Rĩtwa rĩakwa nĩ Kĩmani wa Ngũnjiri, tuma na Nyambura wa Wamosha arĩ mũthathaũri na njĩra ya ciĩko.